Folks, we are live. Welcome to Talking Crit. I am Eric Tenkar, one of your hosts on. Oh God, just said it. Talking Crit. That tells you how organized I am. God help me. All
One
right,
vacation and he's just off the
my
rails.
my
Yeah.
brain gets fried. With me as every week is Jim Kitchen. Below Jim is Dad Mike Battalato. And below me is none other than the one and only Dirk Stanley, Faraway Land, a man whose work I've been following probably for the better part of a decade.
Yeah,
Oh,
10th anniversary.
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember when you first told me about this, Eric. Way back when, and you said you need to look out for this guy. Look at this stuff. I'm like, I've never heard of this, and I, I don't even. I got somehow I got some quick start faraway land stuff. I don't remember how I got that. I don't know if you sent it to me or if I found it or whatever. But yeah, I was really impressed after that. And that was seems like it's so long ago, and it was so long ago. I wasn't exaggerating or misremembering. It was 10 years ago. So that's pretty amazing.
Well, to pull up something that very few people probably remember, because I know I can't find it anywhere on the internet, is Dirk and I did a short-lived podcast back in the day, along with none other than Vince Florio. But it apparently was in the Vince. Oh shit! This isn't as popular as I wanted to be within the first three episodes. Time to cancel it, but I won't
Mm.
tell anybody I canceled it. I just won't schedule
We
the
just
next
won't. Yeah,
recording
we're
session.
gonna ghost. We're gonna ghost you guys. We're just gonna ghost it and
Oh,
That's pretty much how it ended.
okay. I didn't know what happened. I was
Oh,
still
I didn't know what
showing.
happened either. I
I
was
was I
like,
was still showing up for several weeks after that. And no one was there.
Hey, I'm in an empty room. What's the deal?
um, Fugly, I was not the one running the whole podcast. I was just one of the hosts. It was all in the hands of the
Mm.
evil GM.
Yeah.
I love that
Eventually,
you pronounce it fugly when it's fugly.
I like to say I don't want to call
Killing
him
me.
Fugly.
We call him Foogly for some reason.
Yeah, but yeah. So Vince has had this bad habit of if something isn't going to get him an immediate any, he kills it. And in this case, he killed it and didn't tell his co-host that it was dead. So the body was rotting, and we kept on going, "What's going on?" And finally, I'm like, "What's going? No, no, I canceled that." So thank you for the
So
prompt notification.
I've always wondered. Oh well, we shouldn't get off on this tangent, but what would actually have worked for him? I mean, like 3,000 subscribers after a week, and he would say, "Okay, now we're cooking. Now we got something." Because
I
you never have that. You always have to build up. You build. You start with
yeah,
Eric. You and I started with like 30 people watching the show, and then like 300, and then it went to 500, and then I mean, it's just like building, slowly building. And then, thank God for Watsy being ridiculous because we would pick up all this tons of subscribers every time we did a what the hell is Watsy doing now? Yo, what the hell is Watsy doing now? Boom, 1,000 whatever. So, yeah, I don't get that. I mean, everybody has to build slowly and organically, buying your subscribers, which people do. We found out. We've
yeah.
had proof of that. People buy subscribers. Eric won't. I've tried to get Eric to buy subscribers. He won't do it. I
I
don't know
won't even
why.
buy you whiskey,
Just
Mike. I mean, come on.
it's the American way. It's the American way, man. Come on.
It's not our wit or repartee. No. It's the fact that we've got like a Filipino click farm. Like, for $100 we get 2,000 follow. You guys are just, you're hurting me. You just hurt
I
me.
know. By the way, Fugly, switching podcasts like your underwear is a sign of ADD.
Man,
Could be.
I don't want to know what edition you're using.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. So, but again, I remember running Faraway Land from a gaming group, and I was very happily surprised that a bunch of old school OSR gamers who are very much sticks in the mud when it comes to the game system they will play were very happy to play Faraway Land because it is an old school game, even if the mechanics don't necessarily repeat old school mechanics. It really feels that way. So I'm going to put it up on the screen right now, and let folks take a look at Faraway Land. By the way, the art is second to none. If you love unique games, Faraway Land is going to get you right where it should get you. So,
And we're closing in on Cosmere as well.
Oh yes, nice.
Dirk takes the joke and owns it. That's excellent. Good for Dirk.
They just flipped 9,226,000.
I got two theories on Dirk's name, though. I got to get this out early, right? So either his parents were really big Clive Cussler fans, and they were like, Dirk Pitt, we got to make our kid's name Dirk. That kid will win every fight in grade school. And then the other is, does he have a brother named Shiv? Because that would be even better, or a sister. A sister named Shiv would be pretty damn cool, Dirk. I'm just saying.
So I want to put this out there. So Dirk Stanley is just a pseudonym. Yeah. So
I'm wounded. I'm wounded to the core.
And it's because I also publish under my actual real name. But I don't. It's not stuff that's in like fantasy or anything. It's like literary lit. So yeah. So Dirk actually comes from Dirk the Daring from the Dragon.
Yes.
And then Stanley comes from like Stanley Kubrick. So it's like the director of like the role-playing game. That's what the joke was.
That's excellent. That's just great. Hell, that's more than most Kickstarters have going for them. So, I mean, you're way ahead of them right there, Dirk. That's awesome.
Just what the name.
Cosmere does not have that, those bastards.
Right.
You have. Looks like you have funded. So if you back this, you're going to get your product. And the art is really. I think that's a huge bullet point for this because it's very unique. And it doesn't look like really anything else on the market, which I think makes it stand apart.
But hats off to you, Dirk. Now before we get into this too deep, there's just some pretty interesting numbers there. While we've got this on the screen, you're at almost $9,800. You're cresting to 10, and I think your last stretch goal was 8,000. So not only have you crested the $8,000 stretch goal, without any stretch goals beyond that, and I applaud that, right? I think a limited scope of stretch goals is the smart path. But you're almost 2K past that, and yet you're 110 backers. Like that's a hell of a dollar average on a Kickstarter for a participant. And so Dirk, give me the elevator pitch. I'm dying. I am not familiar with Faraway Lands, so tell me what I need to know and tell the audience what they need to know.
Yeah, so in 30 seconds, Faraway Land is sort of an OSR adjacent, rules light, 3-stat, fantasy, science fiction, super quirky, bizarre, super deep lore tabletop role-playing game. And it's really heavily inspired by 1980s cartoons, music, commercials, stuff like that was a huge influence on it.
And you even have dubstep, right? As soon as I saw dubstep, you had me. You had me at dubstep. You magnificent bastard. You had me at dubstep.
It's one of the language that constructs speak, is they speak dubstep. And the joke is sort of that nobody gets it.
Nobody gets it.
Yeah.
Nobody gets it. That's awesome. So how did this come to you? Like what was the blender that sort of tossed all of this, and I know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, so that was very much. Well, it's weird how things act as a catalyst in creativity. And I had been drawing like little comics and doing some stuff for a long time that was based on like this planet that everybody was sort of pretending to be on this show that was sort of like the Muppets, and everybody was just an actor on this show in the middle of this planet, and they were all doing stuff. They were aware that they were on the show or whatever, but I had a bunch of characters from that and nothing came of it. And so I started taking those characters, and the place I was working at one time, we were listening to a song. There's a song, Send Me an Angel from the 1980s. Yeah. So yeah. I always thought that song said Simian Angel, like the simian as in like a primate.
Sure.
And so the idea was like, what if there was like this angel that took the form of a like a monkey, and what if this angel like became this all powerful thing? And then so I started asking myself questions about that, and then built a world around that concept, and that played into it. And then just from that, like I just started to like drop in a bunch of world building elements to sort of explain everything, and that turned into, you know, the books that have been released up until then. And then like one of the big books that's being released in this Kickstarter, which is the Book of Lore, which is, I did the word count on it last night, and it's 130,000 words, and it's a big 8.5 by 11 book, and it's just full of short stories and maps and lore and about the world.
And so, you know, when all of these sort of threads start coming together, and they're actually going to make a tapestry or whatnot, do you find that you know, is this a one-man band, or do you have other people writing on the project? Do you have other people illustrating?
Yeah, so it started off as just me, and I do all the illustrations and stuff and the layout and everything. I was doing everything up until we did an expansion for the first edition called Newsaz, and a friend of mine, Colin Chapman, he actually wrote the game. It was like a Road Warrior car game, and I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, he sort of co-wrote Newsaz with me. And then on this project, I have a friend of mine who has co-written several pieces in the Book of Lore. But all the artwork is mine, and then everything else was me in the beginning. But in this project, I had a friend of mine, Jason Hill, who's been a co-writer on this project with me, and has been a huge help, and a co-editor as well.
I look at it, and I am just immediately like, this is like a great RPG fantasy campaign decided to have a baby with Invader Zim. And there's just this great sense of that. Like I can hear the Zim soundtrack when as we're scrolling through the pictures. This is just great.
Yeah, I think of it as sort of like D&D and Rifts and Adventure Time had a baby together.
Nice.
It's sort of what that should have been the elevator pitch.
Mm-hmm. There you go, right there. Yeah.
I have a homunculus love child of Adventure Time, and that's just sorry.
Well, that. Interesting, Dirk. Do you ever, you know, I mean, it does have that Adventure Time look. Do you ever get accused of ripping that off? Has anybody ever said, "Man, you just rip it off Adventure Time, dude"? Does that ever come up, or?
I don't know. I think people are generally more tactful than that, because I don't interact with.
What? In the RPG industry, I can't believe that.
I don't know. I block a lot out. The comparison's totally been made, Mike. Yeah. It's been made, and I think like on the surface it looks like that because it's super colorful and super cartoony. But I think like on a deeper dive, you realize, I hope people realize that there's been a lot of effort put into this to make a really deep world with a lot of lore and a lot of layers, and a lot of just examination of everything from like, you know, sort of social criticism.
Wait. Eric, scroll back in real quick. I just want to point something out. Okay, go down to the bottom of the page. Go down to the bottom of that 2-page spread. And I want everybody to look at what's in the margins, the lower margin, and now scroll to the next one. Scroll down to the next full page, that double page spread. I love this. This is the Sergio Aragonese like love tale. You know, Warhammer 5th edition. They let Dave Gallagher loose and said, "Go nuts." And he drew all these little tiny cartoon little spot illustrations for the margins, and they sprinkled them through the rule book. And they were among some of the most popular paintings, illustrations that he ever did. Is that 10 years later, people were like, "Would you guys do prints of those? Because those were awesome." And I love that, right? All the cogs and all the gears and so on. This is genius. And it's an attention to detail thing. I just love that. And you've got to point that out to people. That's just spot on. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah, that's high praise. I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's great. That's just great. And that looks like, truthfully, that looks like something straight out of a Peter Mullen illustration. So
Oh
I
God,
love
yeah.
that. And I love that some poor bastard has the giant bone, right? Like, that's just excellent.
Yeah, and square wheels. There was a in the Far Side. There was the Far Side comic by Gary Larson. There was
Yes.
there was a one of them that I always remember. They were in hell and they're standing around this coffee machine, and the guy's like, "Cold coffee." They thought of everything, and I was thinking of like just mundane stuff that would make your eternity a nightmare. And square wheels is one of those things.
Yes. Yes. Oh gosh, that's great. I love that.
I'll tell you one thing that's really cool and I like about Faraway Land, Dirk, is and I'm wearing right now. I'm wearing a shirt, which is I love Kelsey, blah blah. But you've got this. It's dark, it's gloomy, it's creepy, it's got that aesthetic. What I've always loved about Faraway Land is there's kind of this bright, colorful. I don't know if it's cheerful, but it's just kind of this. It's just different because their new retro clone OSR type game, Grimdark. It's got to be.
Everything's got to be grim and dark, and put your dark on top of your grim. And if you can, make it Drim Gark. That'd be great. That'd be Grim Dark. Yeah. Sorry. No.
Yeah, I was trying to get away from that aesthetic a little bit. I don't have any problem with that, and I like games like that, and I like that look. I just wanted something that really stood out, and then also to have that sort of, I don't know if it's like a conflict where something looks really colorful and happy, and at the same time it's incredibly deadly and violent. I wanted those two things to sort of coexist together, and to maybe even be a surprise to some people.
One of the greatest comments I ever heard is some of the most dangerous things come at you in brightly colored polyester. And this is very, very true. Very, very true. So what's that? That's one of the worms. That's a velveteen, right? That's the velveteen.
Yeah.
I just love that, right? Like one of my favorite books as a kid was the Velveteen Rabbit, and you've now turned it into a giant monster, and I love that.
They're stealing its eggs.
That will not go well.
Yeah.
The Book of Lore. Look at that.
So with the Book of Lore, that cover there's an event in the lore that really reshapes the world of Faraway Land and turns it into this sort of chaotic place. And it really stems from that I was talking about, like the simian angel, where they've created this creature that's sort of like an angel that seeks out worlds to invade. And as they're approaching Faraway Land, they sort of break their apparatus that allows them to traverse space, and it just rips open fissures and creates this really chaotic world and just sort of breaks the universe at the same time. That's what the cover comes from. So it's not as straightforward as some of the other covers.
That's just fantastic. And again, you know, at this point, you're in such gravy. You know, you're funded. You're going to hit your goal. You've crushed your goal. This is just wonderful. And so, do you have like in going through all the rewards, do you have like a get your party started pack, like, you know, all the books and then just sort of players books for other people, or a 5-pack or something like that?
Yeah, there's the core rules, and then there's the bestiary, and then there's the Book of Lore. The Enchiridion is just the core rules and the bestiary in just one single book. It's like 500 pages. And then you can get the other two books just as standalone. But yeah, you can get all three books as just like a core package, and it's like I think for the hardbacks it's 120.
Gotcha.
On the Kickstarter.
That's great.
Yeah, and I'm only doing PDF and hardbacks, and we haven't actually unlocked the last stretch goal yet. It unlocks at 10,000.
Excellent.
Yeah, and that stretch goal is is like a little HTML app that randomly generates text, and you can generate level 0 characters and level 1 characters and settlements and all kinds of stuff like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Just press a button and you're there.
Yeah, you're there, because the level 0, 1 characters, you know, you're sending them through like a grinder and just killing them off, and you don't want to spend a lot of time making them. So I was like, this would be really helpful. And it has been really helpful in playtests where new players are like, oh, I could just send them the app, and then they're like, boom, I've got
Oh, look at the bottom. Look at the bottom. It's just nothing but a sea of angry goblins. That's wonderful. That's just the best.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss any of those.
Nice. Sentient plants. Don't trust them. Oh, look at that.
So the headman there, just to like point out, since you're on that page, their whole motivation is that they see bodies as sort of captors or jailers, and so they're trying to free heads and give them freedom, and they carry axes around and decapitate people so that they can free their head kin, essentially.
Nice. That's excellent. Well, and that's a great throwback to the Mars book. Which one of Burroughs' Mars books, where you had the heads detached from the bodies, and I can't think of the specific one.
Chessmen of Mars.
No, it wasn't Chessmen. It was Mastermind of Mars. That's Mastermind of Mars.
I think I don't know if y'all are familiar with, and I don't know how to pronounce his name. Stefan Pogue, the artist.
Yes.
He has. I have a print somehow of his, and I don't know where I got it. And it's these heads that are flying, and I had it on my wall for a long time, and I loved the picture, and I was like, man, how did that happen? And that's really one of the big inspirations, was looking at that piece for a long time sitting on the wall.
I love that you have a banjo playing robot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insidious and it's genius. And he's got adoring fans, which most banjo players are unused to. So that's pretty good too.
Yeah,
you have to be like a Steve Martin or somebody before you.
They never heard anything like it.
That's fantastic.
So that piece that you're talking about there's in the book of lore, there's actually 63 separate short stories, and that a lot of them are illustrated. A lot of them have full page illustrations, but that's one of the illustrations about a construct musician who loses his way and then has to find the music, and then eventually discovers the music and finds himself and that sort of thing. So all of the stories aren't typical sort of fantasy stories, or like, Might and Magic, or, Storm the Castle, Rescue the Princess sort of thing. I tried to go off in some different directions with that. So there's things like, catalogs in there for like a fantasy pawn shop, and there's a poster for a hallucinogenic mushroom music performer who hallucinates or releases spores into the crowd while he's playing music, so that the audience is hallucinating while they're listening to these shows and stuff. So a lot of the stories veer off in a fantasy direction, but I try to do something a little more unique with just regular fantasy. Try to. That was the goal.
And so is it our world? Is it our world adjacent? Is it just thousands of years in the future, or a galaxy far, far away? How do you describe it?
So there's an Earth in the Faraway Land universe, but humans aren't indigenous to Faraway Land. They were brought there during that war that I was talking about before, when everything sort of went haywire. And there are references to Earth. There's one of the main characters in the story is in some of the stories is a character based on Abraham Lincoln, who is sort of this dimensional traveler who was originally created as an immortal, and like every time he dies, he like sort of resurrects in a new place. And then the book references when he was the president of this place called I think it was called the Country of Liberty or something. He's assassinated, and then when he wakes up, he's like being held in the suspension egg by this wizard. So there's some really loose tie-ins with stuff, but Earth does not play a major role in Faraway Land. It's mentioned, it's spelled URTH, and then there's some major alternate history going on with that.
I look forward to the Faraway Land interpretation of Mark Twain.
Yeah, I don't have a Mark Twain-ish character.
Look at those eyes. So what's that? What's that creature?
Yeah, so there's these
mother loaf.
Yeah. there's these different spheres, and one of them is called the bulgosphere. And in this bulgosphere, there's these floating land motes, and there's these things called bulgocats, where there's these giant cats with lots of eyes. And Mother Loaf is the mother of all these bulgocats. She gave birth to them all.
Nice.
God, you tell me you have a Bulgo cat lady who's got like 20 of them.
So yeah, one of us.
Sorry, I just come on. The thoughts occur; they just come out.
There's a bunch of hierarchies and timelines included in there, and so there's a whole list of all these bulgocats. They have their like real names, and then they have their like alternate names. So they have weird real names, like, you know, fantasy names that are difficult to pronounce, and then they have their like sort of nickname, which would be like Cinnamon Cat or like Muffin Cat or something like that. But these are like gigantic, 30-foot tall murderous cats that eat their offspring and eat the people that take care of them. And so they have cute names, and they look sort of cute, but at the same time they're all about chaos and killing everything.
Okay, so now, did you grow up in Louisville?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you buy games? This is an important question.
Yeah, so we have. I don't know if you're familiar with Louisville, but there used to be there's a mall here called Oxmoor Mall, and there was a store.
Something to do.
Something to do. And
that's right. At the top of the escalator was where it was when I used to hit there.
It was on the second floor, right at the top of the escalator, and I used to go in there, and that's where I got like Warhammer and GURPS, and I got Rifts, and they had this whole section. I still remember where it was in the store. It was all these GURPS books, and I wasn't familiar with it at the time, and it was just like there was so much stuff there. It was overwhelming to me. And then on the wall they had like the Ralph Partha minis.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's where I used to buy stuff.
Yep. They used to also have a store in Bashford Manor. And like we'd go visit, my grandmother would go visit her sister, and I got to go between the stores, but Oxmoor was always the better selection.
Okay. I didn't know there was one in Bashford Manor. At that time I lived out in the East End, so I'd ride my bike to Oxmoor, save up, $20 and go buy a book.
I just used to love that store, and every time we ever got to Louisville, I dropped money at that store every single time.
Yeah,
as soon as
awesome.
I saw Louisville, I knew. Yeah.
I love that you're familiar with that. That's really cool.
Yeah, great store, and decent staff. Like, it was always hard. You go to new game stores and you never knew what you were going to expect. But it was the first place where, oh my God, they sold dice separately, like individual die. Like, oh my God. Yeah. I can finally have a D20 that goes 1 to 20. Oh, I can't even believe that's possible.
Yeah. If
it doesn't shatter when I roll it. So,
right. Yeah.
That's it. That's just awesome. So okay. So it's going to fund, and how soon, not holding you to it, but what's your approximate ship date? How quickly do you think you're going to be able to ship it out?
Yeah. So I probably stupidly put November for this year. I've done really good in the past of giving myself enough time, and I added another 30 pages. When I saw it funded, I added another 30 pages to the book of lore, and I'm doing the guy that I'm co-writing it with, Jason Hill. We're doing a really deep edit on everything, making sure that all the lore is there. There's no conflicts where you have timelines and then you have an event happening, or you have names, or you have alternative names. That there's no conflicts in that stuff, and then also that these are just really professionally edited books. That's actually his day job. Is he's an editor, and I've known him for 10, 15 years, and he was interested in being part of the project, and he's been awesome on it, and has given me his expertise. And so these are really clean, well edited books at this point.
And so, Eric, can you pull up the covers? Can you pull up the 4 different colors, the red, the sort of teal, the black, and the blue? If you go to the campaign page, it's under the donor. It's just under the donor rewards sign. So if you page down, you'll see it. I just love these covers, right? I always like it when somebody they sort of riff off an existing some idea and they sort of make it their own. And so, if you go to the campaign tab, it's right up. Oh, how far is it? No, it's right towards the top. It's right towards the very top. the campaign tab.
All right. So hold on.
Keep going. Oh, wait.
Campaign tab.
Yeah, it says
Okay.
what makes the faraway land unique. So if you hit campaign and click story, go page. Yeah, click there. Because I've got it on mine, but I don't see it. So the four covers, the four colored covers, they've got a great riff on old school essentials, and I just love that. I just love that somebody seeing this is going to have a chance to just know what this is right off the top.
I hope so. I'm glad that people pick up on that. I mean, I know like the audience, I'm part of that audience and stuff. So the core rules cover with the orca that's standing there.
Yep.
is based off of A Paladin in Hell, David Sutherland. That's really what the influence for that cover was that A Paladin in Hell is this image. Yeah, that's the one. It's this image that just always stuck with me. And so I took some liberties with it and switched some things up, but that's very much what influenced that piece. But you're right.
Just great.
That is
I just
awesome.
love these. I do.
So Dirk, somebody is looking at purchasing your game. What adventures do you have to run right off the bat if I want to run a low level adventure? Because that's one thing I always look at with systems is that what is there out there that I can run with immediately? I can get 3 or 4 people together. We roll up characters and we can start like our, I don't know, I guess compared to Search the Unknown or Keep on the Borderlands. What's your beginning adventure or adventures you have for this?
Yeah, so in the core rules, there's a level 0 grinder, which is called, I don't even remember the name of it, but it's based on...
Names are inconsequential. Peasants.
There was an old cartoon in the 1980s called Visionaries, and it was about these guys that had they lost all their technology, and in the first episode there's this wizard that has this contest where if you can scale the wizard's mountain, then you can be rewarded with magic. And so this level 0 grinder is groups of PCs scaling this mountain and going through these traps and trying to get to the top in order to get rewards. That's included in the core rules. And then there's a level 1 adventure called Isle of the Rat Wizard, and it's a first level adventure for where you would be playing like normal, where you'd be playing like one PC, and it's
right.
Really
good deal.
Yeah, both of those are designed to really get you going.
All right. So, question: how compatible is the first edition to the new edition?
So, on my blog, there's sort of a change log where at first I was just, I'm going to make some little changes, and eventually it turned into this is becoming different enough to where this feels like a separate edition. So, 2 of the big changes are. The first one is I wanted to reduce some bookkeeping. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, but in the first one you had actions. So if you want to do a specific move, then you would have a certain number of actions that those things would cost. And so let's say that you want to unsheath or sheath a weapon or fire an arrow or cast a spell or something. Each one of them had a separate weapon cost or a separate action cost. And that's all been simplified here. Everybody starts with 2 actions, and then each action, or each thing that you do costs an action. So a movement's an action, and then an attack is an action. There's no more having to reference what an action cost is or anything like that. And then the another big change is the magic system, where in first edition, spells had different damages, and they had different levels, and it was complicated, and the spell levels are all gone. Magic is based on, or spell damage and spell healing or spell effects are based on arcane scores, which is sort of like the boon or the skill that allows you to use magic. And then there's a freeform magic system that wasn't part of first edition that allows you to make spells on the fly and build your own spells using keywords and descriptors. So you take 2 keywords. And allows you to give you an idea for the basics of a spell. So those are 2 really big changes in here. There's been a bunch of others, like mass combat has gone from a ridiculous series of equations that I actually talked to. I actually had a math professor at the university where I worked. Like had him look at it, and I was like, "Hey, does this make sense to you in first edition?" And he was like, "Whoa, this is really cool." And then I was like, when I was revising everything, I was like, "This is way too complicated." So it went from like a 12-page system to a 2-page system for mass combat because, like,
No.
God bless you.
I don't know who's playing mass. If I'm going to play mass combat like that, I'm going to play something else. So that's everything in here was all the changes for the book were really from 10 years of playtest and just being like, I never used this rule when I'm playing, so why is this rule in the book? Or I never used the system, so why am I continuing to use it? So that's really what it was based on.
So I know first edition has a lot of adventures that you publish for it. That mostly pay what you want. Would they be compatible with the second edition? More or less. We're talking compatible, like you know, I don't know. B1 is compatible with second edition D&D. I mean, if you can figure it out, even if it isn't a perfect fit.
Yeah, you could easily figure it out from the first edition adventures for second edition Faraway Land. Like the core of Faraway Land has not changed. A bunch of the mechanics streamlined, make everything a little easier, less bookkeeping. I want people to pick the book up. You read the book, you know how to play, you teach the players how to play, and then rarely do you ever have to reference the book unless you're going for, creature stat blocks or maybe something really special, or you're using like, there's a magic item or something like that. You just don't have to reference. So, and the other thing is, excuse me, after the Kickstarter, I'm going to do all of the adventures. They're all going to move over to second edition, and then I'm just going to release those as pay what you want as well. They're just going to stay like that.
All right, because I got the link. I'm going to throw it into the chat.
What was the first time that somebody came up to you and absolutely just fire hosed you with Love in Faraway Land? When did you realize that it had landed and it was gaining traction? What was the aha moment?
I don't know. I don't know if that moment. I mean, Faraway Land's under the radar. I said, like, it's kind of OSR adjacent, and I really feel like it's sort of an unknown little thing for the most part. I've done some cons where I did one here in Louisville. And a couple of years ago, right before COVID, and I had somebody there that came up to me and was just like, they loved it. They had played it, and they were, it was one of those things where it's like, oh man, like somebody invested their time in something that I created, and they were happy about that, and they had like a great experience doing that, and I don't know, it's just really rewarding. So that sort of interaction is really great. And then there's people online that have used it in like school with their after school clubs, gaming clubs and stuff. And then there's people online. I have a friend on Facebook who lives in Canada, and I think they've just played their like 170th session of the game. And
wow.
Yeah. And so when you hear stuff like that, that's where it's like, oh man, so when you're creating or whatever you do in life, you have these ups and downs where it's like, I feel good in this moment, and then I'm like, what do you do? Why am I doing this here? Or what, you question things or whatever. But you have those moments where people are like, hey, that thing you made impacted me and meant something to me, and that's like a really big deal. So
I think the great joy comes from when you create something you love, and it's very, very clear that Faraway Land is a labor of love, right? When you create a labor of love and it gains traction, the best thing in the world is actually seeing those little points of light out there, or having those little points of contact, and like as soon as I asked you what game show, as soon as I saw Louisville, Kentucky, like, I grew up in Ashland, so I grew up on the other end of the state.
Oh. Yeah.
And so immediately I knew that if you had grown up in Louisville, I could ask you about game stores, and I knew it was going to be something to do. right?
Okay. Yeah.
But if you grew up outside of Kentucky, you have no idea what we're talking about, right? The two stores that lasted forever in Kentucky in Lexington is the Rusty Scabbard and Something to Do in Louisville.
Yeah.
And those two have been around forever, absolutely forever. And it's that shared experience, it's that shared experience of creating something different and unusual and interesting. And as soon as you start to have that reciprocation, you're off to the start. And right off the bat, when we look at the campaign, we were talking about this just before the show started, right? And I said something about it once we did start the show that you're 152 backers, but your numbers are solid for the backers that you have. They're absolutely pouring not only their souls into your game, but they're actually opening up their wallets too. And I think that's another tip of the hat, right? That we were talking about this podcast, or I'm sorry, this show and gaining numbers and followers and so on and so forth. And each one of these pebbles, each one of these Kickstarters or one of these moments is just a pebble in the pond that's just going to create more ripples. So now the next question is, are you coming to North Texas to run it? See, Mike, look at that segue. Look at that.
Yeah, that shocked me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to do that. I've been running a game now for the last few months that we've been pretty good at keeping up with and everything, and I would love to go out and do some like public play more than I have been. And going back to what you were just saying, like people opening up their wallets. When I see that, like I constantly think about like, okay, somebody spent $100 on that, but to get that, whatever that amount of money was, that's somebody's time that went in, and that's like that non-renewable resource that they've given, and they're like, this is important enough to me that I'm going to give you this little piece of my existence for this thing you made, and that's like a super big deal. It's like a creator, somebody making stuff, to have people to do that. That's just
Eric,
really
bring up the bottom comment, the most recent comment, and just I love this. Thank you, and he's talking about us bringing it on the show tonight. I have heard so much about this game, right? So that's your sign, right? The telegraph, gamer telegraph wires, just they never stop, right? There's always something that's percolating out there, and you want to be that thing that's percolating, and it's clearly, it's there, it's out there, it's coming along. I think this is just great. I love this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm happy with the folks that like it. We have a really it's a positive fan base, and people are into it, and they get excited about it, and it's a lot of different communities can sort of be negative sometimes, and I've faced very little of that and had very little of that. I mean, there's always like criticism and stuff, and that's not a big deal, but to have like people who are into it and then really positive about it, that's something that I love. I don't want to go on like social media and see people that are like, some sort of like toxic, whatever it is over my game or something.
But what I'm hearing is you're not about to abandon the print game and go strictly to monetizing microtransactions, right?
Yeah. So what I'll do after this Kickstarter is like, I'm just going to open up Faraway Land to NFTs.
Excellent. Even better. That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Oh, good. Oh, darn.
No, I'm not doing the. We're not doing the monetization. I want it to be accessible to people. So that's the way it's going to stay. And there's going to be like I'm going to release a quick start rules afterwards with enough to play. I probably should have done it for the Kickstarter, but with enough stuff to play so that if people don't, if they can't buy the game or whatever, they can still get in on it and they still have that stuff. And the adventures have been free since the beginning, even though I compiled them into like a single tome. All the adventures for first edition are still out there and they're still free.
And they're awesome. I mean, I've run, when they came out, I ran them for Faraway Land and I ran them for Osric, converting on the fly. But they were just a lot of fun to run regardless of system. They are great for an evening's play. The price is right. Pay what you want. If you get a good use out of it, folks, put some money in that tip jar, because it's the artwork that you see on the screen, but in a small little package. You pay what you want adventures, and Dirk seems to have a limitless number of them. How many are there now? I've lost track. Because
I don't know. I
I
haven't written one in years.
okay, because here I'm gonna, because you can go through
Whoa!
this. Yeah, this. Now some of this stuff I own in print. I either own as the what, the omnibus book, whatever, the one. Yeah, the Tome of Awesome. I own the Tome of Awesome, and then I fell behind in getting some of these adventures, but they are pay what you want. They are very well done, folks, and you really can't go wrong with Dirk's stuff. His quality is second to none, and the price is right. The link is up earlier in the chat. But yeah, I mean, I would say, if you have any questions about what is Faraway Land, grab the quick start, grab some of the free adventures, pay what you want adventures. Mike keeps on dropping like a fly, and you'll get a chance to see the setting, see the system before Dirk had 10 years to play test it. But you'll have a really good idea, and it's a great way to get a peek at what I think is one of the better OSR adjacent systems out there. Really.
That's just great. That's it's when you see the long tail of adventures, right? They're like popcorn. You can't stop with just one. You're going to want to get.
Well,
Grief,
I
they don't stop.
Because, yeah,
That's 25, Dirk. That's 25. That's like crazy pants. You're on fire. There's a reason you took a break. That's nuts.
Yeah, well, some of those are expansion books, so they weren't all like. I think there's like 14 or 15 adventures. I wrote them all in the months following that first Kickstarter in 2014. I was like, I'm gonna do an adventure a month, and then, I mean, I don't know how long you can keep that up and maintain something decent. You're writing and playtesting constantly, and yeah.
So now, I saw that you've got a pawn pack. Since you're doing all the illustrations yourself, do you think, or do you foresee a time where you're going to use some of these illustrations and some of these characters and some of these monsters in something that isn't an RPG, like a very simple board game, or just release them as digital art for people to print at the home? I mean, what do you? It's very interesting because you're the first person that I can recall being on the show where you are a fundamental guiding hand. You're the fundamental guiding hand behind the game, and yet you're also illustrating it in much the same way that Tom Wam did. Tom Wam draws all these great little monsters and so on and so forth as he's creating the game, and you've got something very, very similar, and that's not very common. That's a very uncommon thing to see.
Yeah. So one of the plans is, like, after the Kickstarter, to begin to begin just like putting out content. So like tokens, and I've already got like a whole handful of STL files of 3D characters that I've made for it. I should have had some sitting here and I would have picked one up, but so to do that, and then to have just all of the content just sort of being out there and being accessible. So one of the stretch goals for this was to have everything, because there's 350 entries in the bestiary for this, and instead of like constantly referencing the book, just to have like something as simple as like a PNG file with the image and the stat block and everything, and then have all of those PNG files separate, so that GMs can just pull all that stuff up at once. Same thing with like all of the images for all of the entries, just as standalone images, so that you just have that really accessible there. You can just give it to your group and say, this is what this thing looks like, so
Right.
that you're not going through and like trying to copy and paste and everything. So a bunch of little things like that to make everything just really usable, and also a license that opens us up to third parties so that people can produce their own content for it, and they can sell it, or they can do what they want for it. And that's going to be something that follows the Kickstarter, is that license.
That's really, again, that's a bit more thought process and a bit more end user friendly than I think we normally see, and I think that's a tip of the hat to you. You know,
Yeah, thanks.
That's great. I just love that they can just jump in and having that, I would call it almost an image bank, but having that ability to put that in front of the player makes a huge difference as well. That's fantastic.
Well, I think Faraway Land is such a visual game. I mean, that's honestly, that's one of the selling points.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we can go off like you're playing, I don't know, D&D, any iteration, any OSR rule set. You give me an orc, unless it's the new orcs in 5e, 2024, in which case, I don't know, the Mexican banditos, but we know what an orc looks like, right? We know what a D&D goblin generally looks like, but Dirk's setting, you got so many unique creatures, and nothing here is quote by the book or what we expect. So having a visual reference is awesome, and you have almost enough creatures to have a calendar. You know, like I used to have the, you know, what was it? The oh God, one of the old comic strips that like with the daily pull off for every day. You can have one creature almost for every day for Faraway Land if you're already at 350.
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, I think that like the cover art that we're looking at right now, if you had a way to get, you know, like limited prints done, I think you would sell that. You could make some money on
And prints are in the Kickstarter. They're one of the rewards. So what is the print your reward is in the Kickstarter? I know I saw that in one of the higher tiers. You actually get a print. And
there's no prints in this Kickstarter, like standalone prints.
I think they're included in. I mean, I closed it, and I'm that's my fault. But when I was looking at one of the tiers, I think there's a poster, and I think there's also some prints, but I think it's for the higher tiers. So
not for this Kickstarter.
Okay.
So just from like doing Kickstarters in the past, and because I've done them where I'm like, oh, we're gonna have a map and we're gonna have prints. I just decided, you know what,
Gotcha.
everything in this is going to be GM player centric, where it's like everything is just totally usable and practical instead of that's the reason that there aren't prints in this one.
Gotcha. My bad.
Yeah.
Apologies.
No, it's all good. Also, Jim, I grew up very close to Ashland.
No way. Where?
In Carter County.
Oh my gosh, in Grayson?
Yeah, well, close to it, next to Carter Caves.
So my family originally settled in Leon, Kentucky.
Okay.
And so, you know, had a general store there and so on and so forth. So yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah. That's used to go caving in Carter Caves all the time. So
yeah, I lived like 3 miles from there when I was up until I was in high school. Anyway,
it's a small world. It's such a small world, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah,
it is
something to do.
That's just great. So okay. Oh, all right. So I had not seen this before. And it's so interesting because we get people who come on the show and I'm just, you know, I'm always fascinated by what they've come up with and so on and so forth. And this is spectacle. This is spectacle and quirky and all of the great, you know, I love the names, you know, I just think this is just interesting. And it's interesting in a way where you could just settle in on your couch and you could spend hours devouring it. And I think that's, if there's anything that's come out of the last 10 years, it's of Faraway Lands existing. It's that now it's in a form that's even more interesting, if that makes sense.
I hope so. That was one of the goals for this. is to sort of a coalescing of the content,
Yeah.
and making it really accessible, and then taking all of that lore and doing a book of it. And really, I mean, the the inspiration for the book of lore is the Silmarillion. That's really how it's designed. It's not, I'm not trying to compare it to that, but that's really what I was going for, is like, we're going to map out this world and make this to where you can just sit down and you're like, oh, okay, so here's how all these things are connected. That's what the goal is. Absolutely.
I love Veil Bat, Velveteen Worm.
And my niece is, she's like 10, and that little vector cat.
Yes.
So I was like, hey, do you want to do an entry for this book that I'm doing? And she was like, yeah. So she drew it, and then that's what she actually wrote the description and everything. She's just super smart and like a great artist. So I was like, let's put that in there. So I just touched it up a little bit.
That's just great.
Yeah.
By the way, I love the size comparison. That is such a useful
Yes.
feature that I think should be in just about
Yeah.
every monster book
Yes.
in an RPG. The average person compared to the creature in question. So you get an idea of scale. It's a lot easier to visualize it when you have a visual.
But I sort of want the Veil Bat to actually be carrying the other person, like in its claws, or like I sort of want to see a victim of giant creature.
Yeah.
I remember doing this. I remember Call of Cthulhu had size comparisons. Like, here's a Shoggoth.
Yes.
There's a Nigon. I remember that it had that. I thought that was pretty useful.
Yes, and here's Dreadlord. Here's Dread Cthulhu.
Like,
yeah.
Cthulhu is here's your you're gonna get squashed. You don't fight Cthulhu with your pistol. It's not gonna turn out well.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
And if you see on the page there, the red text where it's like, this is what Jesus said, those are actually like loot drops, so that like the loot automatically stands out. Like, here's what this thing drops. And it's just,
Okay.
that's what that's for.
A lot of focus.
That's very good.
Vector cat pelts are used.
Oh man! Don't tell me you're skinning the cats.
There you go.
There's more than one way to skin a vector cat. Sorry. Going to hell for that. Oh well.
Yeah.
That's great. That's just great.
Nice.
No, you're going to hell for a lot of different things, Jim. That's just one of the different things.
I just think this is great. I mean, really and truly, we have folks that are on and they talk about their Kickstarters, and some of them have heart, some of them have soul, but very rarely do you see something like this where not only have you executed on what the idea was, not only have you been sort of nursemaiding this child along for 10 years, but now you're not just writing it and doing some play testing and creating adventures, but you're illustrating it and what's in your head, right? So what a vector cat should look like, and how you want to make sure the vector cat comes across. And that we often have artists with creative vision that are on the show who talk about their Kickstarter, they talk about their fundraiser, whatever, backer kit, whatnot. But I genuinely think this is just fascinating to see all these really clever little details, right? Talking about the illustrations at the bottom of the margins, or the comparison sizes, and so on and so forth. And that just, that speaks to the heart of it that is so rare. Well done, Dirk. Well done. Really and truly.
No, thanks. You guys have been super kind words and stuff. I appreciate that. I mean, this is, for me, this is going to be this is sort of a lifelong project. I don't know about, like, I'm not planning on new editions, but just like continuing to make stuff in this. I mean, I need something to do, and
I need something to do.
Yeah. And I just love being in there, and working with somebody else at this point in it has like sort of changed that. Like, it's made it fresh, where you're bouncing ideas off, and it's really helped it evolve into something that I'm really happy with. So I really
Now,
appreciate that kind words.
have you
on it.
had an idea for Faraway Land where somebody's like, whoa, pump the brakes there, Sparky? As they, like, what's the most out there thing that has not gotten into the game yet that you're still trying to sort of massage and figure out a way to make that square peg go in the hole?
Yeah. So when I was working with a friend of mine, Colin Chapman, on one of the expansion books, I had a entry in there that was based on like the Cenobites from Hellraiser.
Yes.
And it was just a little it was a little over the top in how they looked and their description and like what they did and everything. So we dialed it back. I mean, the book is really, I wanted it to be accessible for, if a kid picks it up, there might be some heavy themes in there, and there might be some like long words and some language and some things to parse out. But as far as like, is it kid friendly? Is there anything that they're going to encounter? I would say that was probably something that I didn't want. Like, I wouldn't want my niece to pick the book up and be like, what is this? What's a sadomasochist, or what's S&M or something?
Mommy, what are pinheads, mommy?
Hold on, I actually have I need to share something here, so hold on one second. I'm trying to cue it up here. Give me just a second. I've got to send the picture to myself here. So
Pardon me while he whips this out.
Whoa.
Whoa.
I'm not watching a lot of Gladiator movies. Knock it off, man. Hold on a second. So let me save the image. Okay, so here I'm going to share this, and then you'll understand why what you said. You had me at where are the damn pictures? No, that's not what I want. Hold on, I'm working on it.
Dirk, we're not professionals. So
I know. Come on, man. It had never going to happen.
Looks like Kickstarter is long to get another 200.
Your internet hates you, Mike.
Completely coincidence. Completely but coincidence. I don't know.
Keep talking while I fix my problem here, real quick.
Well,
keep talking while I whip this out. All right.
Stop! Don't make that joke.
Jim, for the 30 minutes, you're supposed to call your doctor. So,
I can assure you that's never been a problem. I don't know what's going on, sir. Let me see.
I guess
Mike, technical issues. That's what we expect.
I didn't think that Clive Barker would be a good mix with like kid lit,
I don't know. I think there's a lot of potential there. I mean, maybe not the potential you want, but it's the potential that
the potential you need.
No,
that too. That could be a thing.
And if you all, if anybody hasn't read the Clive Barker short story "In the Hills, the Cities," if you're familiar with this short story,
love Clive. He's one of my favorite authors of all time. Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah, check that story out.
Maybe one of the top 10 horror stories of all time, to be honest with you. At least 21st century.
Yeah, Barker had a real hot phase for a while, and I really, we're all book hounds, right? So we all have our sort of our go-tos and so on and so forth. And I went through a serious Barker phase in the 80s and early 90s, sort of like when everybody else did. Yeah. I think it's very hard to find Barker's more recent work that carries some of that same that early stuff did, because it came out of nowhere and just hammered away. And I'm a big fan of that. So
the one that always struck at me as a New Yorker.
Can I tell my Clive Barker story that I've told before? But
please do. Let's hear it.
So in the 90s, I went to a convention called Dallas Fantasy Fair. It was fiction fantasy. It was everything. It was one of the best conventions Dallas Fort Worth area ever had. They've never had anything like it since. I went there, brought my paperback Books of Blood to get Clive Barker to sign it. He was there. And I got there a little late due to traffic because it's Dallas. And his seminar was ending, and he was supposed to go to their seminar all the way across on the side of and so his handlers are like, okay, Mr. Barker, we have to go. And they're moving. And I said, Mr. Barker, can I get you to sign my Books of Blood? They're, no, he can't sign anything. And he goes, oh, no, hold on. I'll sign it. If you don't mind of the convention center where their seminar is. I'm like, I don't mind. And so I got Clive Barker talk. We walked and he signed convention center, and just I thought that was such a gracious, amazing, cool thing to do to an author at the time, which was he was super popular. This is back when his popularity was huge, but to take that time with me and say, no, would you like to walk with me? I'll sign while I'm walking. I still had that was an amazing thing for him to do. So I've always been a huge Clive Barker fan because his handlers were like, no, you stay away, peon. Mr. Barker must go to the other side of the convention center. And I don't really remember one thing we talked about in 5 minutes. I think I just totally zoned out because I was just so starstruck. Yeah, I don't remember anything. But we may have mentioned that's from the Hills of Cities. Yeah, well, we mentioned. I talked about a couple of stories I really liked, and I may have mentioned in the Hills, the Cities. That's such an amazing story. But yeah, awesome. But he's always a thumbs up in my book because of that. That's something that a lot of the, I guess, famous people don't really take the time to realize how much can affect a fan. Just a positive interaction like that. And so I've always been a huge Barker fan because of that. So. That's my Clive Barker story. That's it.
That's an awesome story.
I heard a great story about Clive Cussler. I mentioned Clive Cussler earlier, and Cussler is very famous. When he was alive, if he went to the booksellers conventions, he would always sign autographs. As long as there were people in line wanting his autograph, he would sit and would sign 8-10 hours. He was going to get everybody's books signed if they were there to get his signature. And it's one of those really interesting things that, there's some authors that would never do that. They're a little bit more prima donnas than I think we all would like to admit. But he was that guy that knew what he needed to do and did it. And so, all right. So I've got this queued up. So let me.
Oh. By the way, in the vein of what Jim said, Larry Correa, I was at a book signing for him once. He was only supposed to sign an hour, and he did the exact same thing. Larry Correa signed until everybody was gone, which I thought was pretty amazing too, because he was only scheduled 1 hour, and after 1 hour they said, okay, that's all Mr. Correa scheduled, and the line is still.
Because I'm an idiot,
No,
I managed to do this. All right, so after all this,
I vamped for you, Jim. I vamped for you. Nobody noticed you were gone. It's good.
You're the best. You're just absolutely the best.
Well,
where did I put it? Great. Okay, now I can't find it. What the hell?
What was that series that Larry? What was his big series? Oh, Monster Hunters.
Monster Hunter International.
Yes.
Monster Hunter.
Yeah. So I was just telling him, Jim, that Larry did the same thing that Cussler did. He was local and he did an hour signing, and the line was still out the door. And he said, "No, I'm going to sign everybody's books." And
That's
so
right.
He was there for another couple, which was that was cool. But there are some good celebrities out there. There are some good guys out there.
And
Eric's a friend of Eric at a convention that he's a celebrity. He'll give you 5 minutes, and then after that, of course, then he's a great guy.
Appreciate it. Not a celebrity.
All right. Okay, now I found it. No, I'm not going to share my screen. There's a reason for.
I think I better get this out while Jim works on his
No, here we go.
Oh,
Okay, so this is my kid's Halloween costume
Wow.
from a few years ago that I just thought would be fun to share. And so let's see, where's the next one?
How old was Jack when this?
So he was like 12, right? Now I want you to imagine that he went to school that day. We got him up early. We shaved his entire head. We glued the Lego antennas to his head that we had painted. Then we drew in the lines and sent him to school this way.
Wow.
Right? Now I gave him a ride and he had the lament cube, right? He had a lament cube, so he was playing with it all the way to school and he took it into the classroom. But this is as creepy as these pictures are, right? Like I had a lot of fun with this
Wow.
But the best is I got this picture from his teacher. In the caption, she texted me and said, "I have to look at this all day." and so he stayed in character. He never broke character all day. He just was walking around stone-faced with the cube, and he'd sneak up behind teachers, and he scared one so badly she had to go to the bathroom. And they just gave him first prize. But he had gone to the principal to clear it, and he said, "I want to come in a costume. I just need to make sure you're okay with it." And the principal's like, "Who are you coming as?" And he goes, "I'm going to come as the character Pinhead." And the guy didn't know who Pinhead was and signed the piece of paper and said, "Yeah, you're good. Go ahead. Knock yourself out." So yes. So that is what I sent to school for Halloween. And yes.
Pinhead, he probably thought Pinhead's some kind of animated character. That's an animated charter.
Whatever. That's right. So yes,
it's a Pokemon thing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I think this was 8th or 9th grade, but it was glorious. It was a glorious moment that I thought I would share. So
That's fantastic.
Before we embiggened it, and I just saw the little thing at the bottom of the screen, I was like, "Why are we showing Tom Tullis?" I just saw the shaved head, and I was like, but then I saw the Pinhead part.
But why not? Why not show Tom Tullis? Come on, the man's a legend.
So anyway, yes, as soon as you mentioned the Cenobites, I'm all in. So yes. Oh, and I'm sorry. He also went out for Halloween. He went out for Halloween that night, and he would go up to doors, and he was by himself, like nobody was with him. So he'd just walk up to his by himself, and he would go up to the door, and he would go. And people would open the door thinking they're about to see unicorns and Transformers. And about half the time they would scream. And so we were walking from house to house and a guy comes up to me and said, "Are you Pinhead's dad?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's me." And he goes, "He scared my wife so bad she had to go back home." I was like, "What happened?" And he goes, "Well, her parents tortured her that movie when she was a kid. And she just, and she says she turned around and saw your kid and she's like, 'You're taking him the rest of the way. I'm going home.'" And I was like, "Oh, okay."
He might have been happier that way. Well, no.
All right. So anyway, yes, that's
Dirk. I have a question. I just thought of while Jim was talking there. And so, how familiar are you with other? Are you familiar with Shadow or any other kind of retro-ish OS games that are out there? Do you take inspiration from anything? Is this do you just ignore those and say no? If I read those, it's going to taint what I'm doing here. I just want to have a pure experience. How do you deal with that stuff?
Did you? I'm sorry, you cut out there. Did you say OS like OSR? Like Shadow Dark and stuff. Do you actually read those and look at them, or do you just say no? I'm going to stay away from that. I don't want to be influenced by anything that's not my own vision. No, I mean, at this point, I'm staying away from stuff just because I have sort of limited space as to what I'm buying at this point and putting into a collection, but as far as Swords and Wizardry and Labyrinth Lord and Ostrich and Old School Essentials and all that sort of stuff, I have all that. I've read all that stuff. I play that stuff. Right now, I gravitate to just really simple stuff that's really quick to play. Tunnel Goons, excuse me, stuff like Tunnel Goons, where you can teach a group of people in just 5 minutes to pick up the game and begin playing. That's really stuff that I'm looking at these days. Yeah, that's what that's sort of my inspiration. As far as like faraway land, honestly, the inspiration is really 1980s stuff. Just like this mashing up the culture of the 80s into, I don't know, just the like 80s cartoons and attitudes and things like that. That was very much the inspiration, much more so than I think tabletop games, at least for the world. If that makes sense.
That makes
Makes
a lot
perfect
of
sense.
Now-
I think this is just such a great game, such a unique game in a market of, as Mike said, we got a lot of grim and dark and dark and grim, and
Yes.
and having something that's it doesn't mean that it isn't as deadly, but having something that just sets itself apart is a big step in a right direction, because you don't want to be an imitator in a sea of imitators. And I think we'll see that in the next year or two. We'll have everybody who wants to be the next whatever. But
well, Jim,
but
we talk about this a lot. We talk about this a lot. That what is there left for the OSR? Because we've done different flavors and everything. I mean, the last two big ones that
oh, God love his heart, he's been
of course,
throttled
Shadow
again.
Dark. But you know, but where do we go from here? You know, so many directions we can go. We talk about, do we need more OSR games? Do we need more OSR rule systems?
I think that Dirk's game is the answer to that question, which is we need more games. We need more creative endeavors that are not similar to previously published endeavors. I don't know who's going to write the next big hit of, I don't know who's going to write the next hit of 2028. I don't know who's going to write the hit of 2028. But I know if I'm going to go into a store and I'm going to say, I got $50, show me an RPG that I ought to know about, right? This is where we have to depend on stores to know what people want. But again, I mean, I think we are right just before the iceberg of no creativity hits, of infinite Shadow Dark copies, or third-party Shadow Dark, or by the way, it's Dark Shadows, or whatever. And that's fine. Like, there's an audience for that. This is the same thing that the peril you have with Dungeon Crawl Classics, right? The third-party adventures are great, but now there's a lot of them, and I'm not sure that I need a third-party adventure of my trip to McDonald's, right? I like some of this stuff is just not going to fly, and again, it's a big enough ecosphere. We can have a lot of different games that are competing, but not in competition. And Faraway Land, I mean, right off the bat, it's about a faraway land. It has nothing to do with 1980s post-apocalyptica. It's not pulp heroes. It's not whatever. It's its own unique setting. Not everybody's going to appreciate that setting, and that's okay, because the people who do love the setting are going to embrace it wholeheartedly and say, I recognize what this spiritual love child is, and I recognize what all these things have come in together. But OSR, I think the umbrella for OSR is huge, and we get a lot of things in the OSR, but I would much rather have quality than I would quantity. And that's what's always driven me, right? I'm a guy that, we talk about comic books on this show, and I'm the guy that actually looks at a comic book before I buy it, and I look to see what the artwork looks like. And if it's hot garbage with a great cover, I walk away. Most DC books. And I'm just that kind of guy, right? Like, I still have the one Marvel title I have a subscription for at my local comic book store is Thor. That's it. It's Thor. Because the artwork has always been consistently spectacular on Thor. But I'm the guy who remembers that after Marvel had the license for Star Wars, they put some of the laziest, worst artists they had to work on Star Wars for an infinitely long time. And and okay, they may be able to deliver the art on time, but that doesn't mean that I'm okay with that. We don't need another B2 or S3. We need the next. That's a great point. Marcelo absolutely hits a home run with that comment. And so that's why, like, I love the OSR, but many times the OSR is continuing to apply paddles to a long dead horse that we have beaten into a pulp.
Watch these reprints of everything.
That, yes, we don't need to do that. And so that's why, like, you can tell watching the show that I get interested in projects, right? I think Faraway Land is one of the most interesting things we've had on in 6 months. I look at the number of backers, and the first thing is I look to see if it's funded. It's funded. Hot damn. Woohoo. Going to print. Kick the tires, light the fires. But after that, like, the number of backers is always interesting to me, right? Because I know that for every backer on Kickstarter, there's another 3 to 4 people that they're talking about, or Faraway Land is going to hit that gaming group, and like every good contagion, it's going to take a few more people with it, right? It's like COVID at Gen Con. Thank you, super spreaders at Gen Con, for making all of us sick. You're just the best. But again, right? It's how this stuff percolates through the hive mind. And so if it's been 10 years to get it to this point, in another 10 years, it will be unrecognizable, but it'll still continue to be in print and so on. So,
and this is what we talk about. We give Watsy a hard time because the content that everybody remembers from the last 10 years are the endless reprints of first edition D&D that we see over and over and over again, because there's no new ideas at the House of Non-Ideas, which Watsy is what they used to call Marvel the House of Ideas. Let's call Watsy the House of Recycled Ideas, because that's all they do. Let's reprint B3 again, or S3 or S4. And yes, you're absolutely. That was a great point, Marcel. We need another. And I know that we have people. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with it, but Matt Finch has given us some great original adventures. If you have a chance, check out his Spire of Iron and Crystal. I think it was the first adventure he wrote for Swords of Mystery, and I think it is one of the most inspired OSR adventures that have ever been published. And it's different. It's not like anything else, and it's really good. And we need more. We need more like that. More that we say, okay, this is something I point to as something the OSR came up with that didn't exist before.
And I think a great point to that is every one of the major publishers should have a couple of adventures that are their benchmarks. And so I think one of the ones that comes to mind for me for Dungeon Crawl Classics is Sailors in a Starless Sea.
Yes,
it's a spectacular funnel adventure, and the more people, I mean, it is to DCC what S3 or the A series or B2. Yes, Sailors in a Starless Sea helps you understand the concept of the funnel, and gets that through your head. And so I would say my challenge to a publisher, right? And Dirk, you are included in this challenge. My challenge to all of that is your game system needs to have an adventure that is the summation and totality of what that game is offering. I don't know what Shadow Darks is. I don't think there is one for Shadow Dark. I don't know, the Reincarnated series, Bob mentions those. Those are reprints. They're reprints, and then they're tarted up with 5th edition rules and other sort of modular. You can stick it in and run it in here, and you can run it in there. But I want original. I want something that just grabs a hold of you, and just the same way we were all talking about this module when we were kids, or that module when we were kids, and so on and so forth. Every game needs to have that module. And if it doesn't have that module, it goes along, but you've got to have something that just lands, that sticks the landing and gives you a 10.
We've talked about this before too. When we were younger, those of us who grew up and played in the 70s and 80s, we had benchmark adventures that everybody did because back then there wasn't a lot to choose from. So you
Yes,
would go to
market
the
was much
convention,
smaller, and everybody got the same modules for Christmas.
and you would go to
Everybody
the
did.
convention and you go, what did you guys do during S1 Horror? Everybody had an S1 Horror Stories because everybody played it because there was so few adventures at the time. Now we've expanded that so exponentially. Now we have so very few benchmarks where everybody can sit there and say, okay, this is something that everybody's played that you can hold up against every.
Yeah, I
It's
totally agree
very
with
sad
that.
in a way. But I agree with you, Jim, that I think if you look at the first 4 or 5 adventures for the DCC system, Savage Kings is another one. Doom of the Savage Kings. I think they're all very good, and they pretty much say this is what DCC is. It's not Dungeons and Dragons. It's based on Appendix N. It's not based on just Dungeons and Dragons that came before. This is a new way of looking at adventures and looking at stuff. And I think the first, like I said, 3 or 4 in that line are really good towards that. And and we haven't had, once again, we haven't had anything like that from WotC since probably the Mines of Phandelver. I mean, I don't know what do they have benchmark in the last 10 years that everybody's like, oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, you got to do that.
I want to be a barista. Come on. No?
My barista.
Well, and so Dirk here. Wait. Dirk, what's your favorite module from when you were a kid? What was the adventure that like you all talked about it in your group, or you ran it and you're still 30 or 40 years later telling stories about the adventure?
Well, the Isle of Dread was something that
great one.
It was just something that like all of my friends had. And I think that's like to the point that you all are making, this idea of that benchmark adventure is so needed today, whereas maybe in the past you didn't necessarily have to have that, is because it feels like there's so many things that have like our culture is so fractured in the sense that
Yes.
you've got 150 different things to choose from, and so everybody's having these different experiences, and when you don't have that benchmark, whatever it is, then you don't have that sort of unifying or that like tether point where everybody in that cultural group is connected to that thing. And
Yes.
I think you all are totally right about that. I think that you have to have that. Absolutely.
I applaud having an ecosystem of unbelievably diverse games. Like I'm a big fan of that, right? Because that means that I want to kill monsters and I want their treasure and I want it all, right? There are games to service that, right? If you want to get into the political ramifications of orc unification and why we need to talk about how they're doing square dancing, there's some game for you. But again, all these really, really specific silos create the problem of a lack of coherence and not everybody is sort of thinking about these. There is no commonality. There's no shared mother tongue of, the Caves of Chaos in B2 or Isle of Dread and all the things that go into that or whatnot. And I think that's we've had the success of the growth of the industry, the popularity of the industry, and so on and so forth. But I think one of the things that's going to happen is as fifth edition has faded and this launch of the new version, I think we will go through an RPG downtime. And I've said this before, it's really easy to make mistakes and cover them up when you're making stupid amounts of money. But when the market starts to get tight and there starts to be problems, we'll see the RPG industry go through a contraction of some kind. And when that happens, then you'll start to see the shared commonality again. You'll start to see, as publishers tighten their belts, they're only going to publish the stuff that playtests well, that has had huge receptions at conventions. Yeah. That's where their money will go. I mean, look at Goodman. Goodman was publishing modules left, right, and center, and they have slowed down. To their credit, the modules are great. The adventures are fantastic, but they're certainly not coming at the machine gun pace they were for a while. and
Right.
and I think we'll see that happen and continue in the industry.
I think we'll see it. We're seeing a little of that. And I think mostly nowadays, my theory is it has to do with longevity. And I'll give you two examples. One's Frog Eye Games Rappanathic. You run into more and more people now that have tackled this giant mega dungeon, which has been around since 2000, 2001. It first of all was 3E, then it was 3.5, then it was Pathfinder, then it was Swords of Wizardry, now it's 5E. It's existed across several gaming editions of D&D. And I think you run into people now that like, yeah, we've been running a Rappanathic campaign for X amount. What about this monster? There's a few benchmark monsters in there. But, oh, what about the monster you can't kill, the garbage monster? Oh yeah, we fought that, this and that. And then
I love how we get to his point, and that's when his cable goes out. Sorry, try it again, Mike. You cut out at the critical point.
It was so the other one is Greg Gillespie's Barrel Maze, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary, and I think you have enough people now that have been through Barrel Maze and are running campaigns in Barrel Maze. It's becoming a bit of a classic. It's becoming a sort of a OSR type classic. Or people are like, oh yeah, this room or that room, and those are the two I see from the OSR most often that people talk about. But they've had to build up this reputation over time. This isn't something that immediately happened because there's so much stuff out there, and people will play this. And I think that there's a couple of OSC modules that have that could possibly do that because they've had some really good. Hole in the Tree is really interesting. They had some really interesting modules for OSC. I think a few OSC, if OSC keeps its popularity, I think there's a few from that system that'll eventually reach the quote unquote benchmark type classic. But I don't know. I mean, any other ideas? That's really all that comes to mind when I think about something like that modern wise.
So I'll throw this out, like on a shelf over here, the Folio collection. Like the Folio adventures are very well done. They look great.
They are.
They play okay, but I think that's another one that percolates. It's got a very interested set of subscribers / backers, and it percolates along and it hits all the right spots. But then I started looking at some of this other stuff, and The Dark of Hot Springs Island. Hot Springs Island is one that's
a very good adventure. That's a really interesting adventure.
And again, like a one man band, but sells and people have had good times with it. So
yeah, I think Stonehell. So here's my only problem. I think Stonehell would have been a great candidate for that, Phaedrus. There's two problems with Stonehell. Number one, it's written for Labyrinth Lore, which for all intents and purposes is kind of a dead system right now. It's not really supported. And number two, Michael Curtis didn't really want anything to do with it for the last 10 years. I mean, he wrote it and it was kind of an experiment. He wrote it as a one-page dungeon type mega dungeon. And then he just kind of lost interest in it and hasn't really promoted it. And so I think that's really kept it from being, just kind of and I think if he'd have kept up with it, I think if Michael Curtis had published an edition every 3 or 4 years and perhaps maybe even switched it to another system, maybe OSC or something more popular, I think it could have been one of the most popular dungeons out there because it's very clean. It's very easy to run. It's really a fun adventure. It's just kind of fallen off the face of, what we remember about modules because I didn't even think about it till you brought it up. I'm like, oh yeah, Stonehill is really great. It's just, I don't know if it's played that much anymore. I'll be honest with you.
And come on, right? We're complaining about the unbelievable diversity in the market, and that's great until it's not as great as it needs to be. And so I'm very interested to see where things sort of go. Everybody always remembers how hot it was how cool it was when we all got the A series, the back half of the A series modules, A3 and 4 finally came out. We all remember Q1 finally coming out. We have those great memories, but we always forget about what happened with the RPG market in the mid 80s. And we always forget about, second edition came out in the middle of a really bad time for, D&D sales just cratered. And none of us are particularly excited about WotC's fall release, but we'll see how things go. But you can only burn so hard, so fast for so long, and then the market's going to change. And like I have no idea what Critical Role's viewership is, but I would be very surprised if Critical Role is hitting the same viewership numbers now that it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
And I've
I'm
never
sure
heard
they have
anybody talk about. Do you ever hear anybody talk about Daggerheart? I've never heard anybody talk about Daggerheart.
I have
see
never heard of
people play it.
Daggerheart before you mentioned it.
That's Critical Role's game, right, Eric? I mean,
Yeah.
that's their role playing game that was going to take
Kickstarter.
the world by storm because it was back. That's what they're playing now on Critical Role.
I'm sorry. Let me
is
try this
Daggerheart.
again. Where is Daggerheart on remainder sale? Because you can tell me where I can pick it up for like $1 a pound. I'm interested, but
Thank you, Jim. That's beautiful. No, but it was a popular Kickstarter, right, Eric?
I'm sure it was pretty.
It did great, and because it was the game that Critical Role was going to use now because they were dumping 5e, and I don't know anybody that plays it. I don't see it anywhere. I don't even know what the cover looks like.
My God. Here, look behind me at this library of books that I own but have not played. I'm, come on, right? Like 90% of us buy stuff and never play it. We read it.
Sure.
I own that. I have a testimony to it behind me.
Mhm.
But really and truly, I got to be choosy about what I back and what what I'm interested in and so on and so forth, right? Because I can't bring yet more and more and more. 40 pounds, 50 pounds of RPGs can't come into my house every day.
Well, I've told you this before, guys. This is why I just got the latest Gary's Appendix issue 6. I'm into little tiny
Look at that. He's frozen again.
fansies dollars, and there's lots of great ideas and great. I mean, they do a great job on this. It's just Jeff does a great job on the appendix on the Gary's Appendix books. But that's what I buy now, Jim, because I can't afford to buy giant rule books anymore. I buy these little fancy.
I'm sorry. I only have this much life left in me at this point. Or, I don't know, this much somewhere. I have an undefined period of life left in me. And I know I cannot begin to memorize and embrace and love yet another miniatures game. Jesus, no. I got enough miniatures. Shit, I'm starting to get rid of miniatures at this point. But like, I had my moment of clarity, my moment of zen at Gen Con when I walked past the Corvus Belli booth, and they're like, we've got a new game. You loved Infinity. You're going to love whatever, Warcrow or whatever it's called. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, no, I may love it and it may be the greatest game in the world, but I have a tidal wave of 40K miniatures and Necromunda miniatures, and I already have Infinity miniatures, so you already got your claws into me. Back off. Don't talk to me.
These are aspirational purchases, and look, most game companies know that at this point, at our age, these purchases are going to be aspirational purchases, and they know this. And they're like, they're pitching it because
I'll get to it someday.
It looks
no,
cool.
you won't.
Cool.
You will not.
No.
No, you will not.
One thing when we're talking about comics, I wanted to pimp this. I found that I'd never heard of this comic before, Skull Kickers. I found the first trade in a half price books by Jim Zub and Edwin Hong, and I loved it. So I bought the whole series. There's like 5 or 6 trades, and I'm enjoying it. If you like swords and sorcery with a little humor, dark humor, very dark black humor. The artwork's fun. It's kind of cartoony. I've enjoyed it. I'm on the second trade so far. I've really enjoyed it. Good job. This came out probably 10 years ago. That's how far behind I am in my comic enjoyment there. But Skull Kickers,
right.
That's a good one.
I got 2 books for this week. I made sure. Number 1, just buy it. Oh my God. The official story of the film of Conan the Barbarian. Oh,
I'm enjoying myself over here. Turn the camera off for 5 minutes.
Oh my God. Right. So just spectacular. Just go buy it. It's amazing. It's everything you wanted in a single book. It's on Amazon. Just don't even kid yourself. But then because we talk about we do these little deep cuts every now and then. For the longest time, I didn't read comic books. Like, I got out. But there was one comic book that I still followed. And so I can remember starting to read it in, I think, 1999 or 2000, somewhere in there. I think that's when it started. And it only ran for like 27 issues. And it's still one of the best comics of the last 2 decades. There is no question. It is perfect in its form. It is a loving tribute to all of the great things that we know from comics. And that is Planetary.
It's amazing. Best comic of the last 20 years.
Yes.
And it's all self-contained. Buy it. It's all self-contained. It's in there. You don't need any other reference, except it does touch the nostalgia because it refers to a lot of things obliquely.
It contains Planetary 1 through 27, the Planetary Batman crossover, the JLA, and the Authority crossover. But the Batman crossover, that's the best. Because the Planetary Field team goes to Gotham because they've heard about a guy who is jumping dimensions. And so they're trying to track him down, and they catch up to him. And as they catch up to him, who also catches up to them but Batman? And this poor guy who has no control over his ability is like having a fugue attack, like a fugue mental state. And suddenly, everything changes. Like he has a bubble of normalcy, but then he's moved you to another dimension. And so the Batman changes to different Batman from different eras. So there's the original Batman with the really great car with the shield on the front of it and a gun. There's the Neil Adams Batman that looks exactly like the Neil Adams Batman. There is a Dark Knight Batman. So every couple of pages, another Batman, another Batman. And when he makes the jump, and the woman who is the really, really indestructible strong woman on the field team has to go one-on-one with the Adam West Batman, it's hysterically funny. And then as they finally subdue him and they get him calmed down, the last transition is to a Batman we don't know from the future. And it isn't Batman and Beyond. It's one of the greatest crossover issues I've ever seen in anything. So Planetary, hands down, buy the omnibus. Yep. You won't regret it. It's a loving tribute. Every issue is a tribute to something you probably know and something you probably love.
If you ever wanted to see what would happen if Reed Richards was a bad guy and the Fantastic Four were evil, they are the big bads in this series, and you realize
Jesus
that Reed Richards really screwed up by being a good guy because he would have been a great villain.
Yes, the Four
would be amazingly horrible, horrific bad guys because they are.
They go through this long arc of slowly revealing each member of the Four, and you know you get to meet the Human Torch equivalent very early on, and he's as morally bleak a character as imaginable. He is awful. He literally incinerates Kal-El upon arrival on Earth. He literally incinerates them and then takes the phone call and says, "You didn't tell me you wanted him alive." And you're just like, "Oh my God."
Yeah, because the Four is trying to subjugate Earth, and so they're trying to deal with
they've made a deal with off-world masters, and it's just
it's a great comic. Jim's right. That's a no-brainer. Buy the omnibus, everything's in it. Oh, you don't need anything else. There you go. Boom, pick it up, read it, you're done. It's great stuff. So yes, our suggestions this week are Planetary and Skull Kickers. Yes. Pick those up. You will not be disappointed.
And Dirk's Kickstarter. Come on, let's not forget.
And Dirk's Kickstarter.
Dirk's like, what the hell, man? Like the back half of the hour is not cool, man. So
if you have time after all that, watch one of Eric's blogs, or not. Whatever.
By the way, Mike, Daggerheart never kickstarted yet. It's coming.
I saw that.
It still feels like it. It feels like with all the hype that there was about it. But
it's been how many years? How many years has it been?
Shh. We don't say those things out loud. That's the quiet part we don't say out loud.
Well, no wonder we haven't seen it. It doesn't exist yet. Good Lord.
All right. So, what other RPG news do we have?
It's been actually
Anything
a
else?
relatively slow
Well,
week.
Watsy didn't screw up anything this
All right.
week, so yeah, kind of have to roll past.
So, 6 years ago, I was in London, England. I hadn't been back to England since 1998, I think. And took the time to go, took my kid. But before we left, I knew that my dad was going through a battery of tests and the whole 9 yards. And so today is the 6th anniversary of me finding out that my father was terminal. And I can't tell you how awful that afternoon was. I'm in London. I'm 1,600, 1,800 miles away from where I want to be. And God love their hearts, at the hotel, there was a group of friends that were sitting around with one of the guy's dads. I can't even remember what the occasion was. But they very quickly picked up that something was not quite right with the obnoxious American. And I had a bottle of Blanton's with me, as one does when one travels, because you never know. And to their credit, they sat and consoled and drank with me and the whole 9 yards. And so what I guess I would say is, first of all, I don't care how intrusive it is, make sure you get tested for prostate cancer and so on. That's not what my dad had. But this is a great time to remind everybody, we all have those friends that we talk to all the time. We have those friends that we talk to sporadically. Some of us don't have our parents anymore, or my dad, I don't have my dad. And whoever it is that's important to you, make sure that you tell them how important they are. I had very little time after the diagnosis. My dad passed away at the end of October, but I can still remember the kindness of strangers 6 years ago tonight who were willing to sit, including the Muslim who didn't drink, who still knocked back Blanton's with me. And so hats off to you, buddy. But this is about remembering all the people that are important to you and making sure they know that. We get caught up in our daily lives. We get caught up in going to conventions or playing in groups and so on and so forth. And we sometimes neglect friendships, sometimes consciously, sometimes not so consciously. But this is a great reminder that make sure you take the time between now and next Wednesday to tell everybody how much that you care about them, that you love them, that you're glad that they're your friends. And so I poured one. Cheers to all of you.
There you go. Well said, Jim.
Yeah, and look, for those of you that know it or don't know, my buddy and the co-founder of North Texas, Doug Ray, passed away from stage 4 colon cancer, which he did not discover till he did a long delayed colonoscopy. I'm a huge colonoscopy pusher. I have mine done regularly, and I just had mine, another one done last year. If you haven't gotten one, they're now saying over the age of 50. It used to be older, but now over the age of 50, you should get one done. Doug had one earlier. Maybe they caught it. He was an amazing person. He lived for 5 years with stage 4 colon cancer before it finally caught up with him. But look, take care of yourself.
That's right. And come on, colonoscopies are a great chance to wear a t-shirt that says, "I'm here for the butt stuff." And don't think for a second that the staff don't get a chuckle out of that, because they do. I can tell you from previous experience that even if you just take a marker and write it on the t-shirt, this goes over well. This goes over very well, because when you're in that field, you'll take whatever humor you can get at any point in time.
I guess
but
it's always shitty.
It is. And come on, my dad was on immunosuppressants. He'd been taking methotrexate for psoriasis, but his doctor had never caught on that you're also supposed to take, I can't remember off the top of my head, because otherwise it destroys liver function. And so it just damaged his liver. He was on immunosuppressants, and his cancer wildfired. That was the term. He had 50 plus tumors as big as your thumb in his head. His entire body was riddled. He only lived for about 3 months after the final diagnosis. And there was no catching that. There was no sort of stopping it. Like he went from a clean PET scan at the end of June to where we were in August. But you don't know how much time you have, right? So if I seem somewhat fatalistic in saying I only have this much life left, it's because I have a mountain of miniatures. I have a mountain of books. We talk about this all the time, right? Like you gotta limit this stuff. But I always say you pick your friends, you pick the ones you love. You're screwed with family. You're stuck with them. Except cats. Dirk clearly has a very affectionate cat.
Yeah, mine's taken the night off, which is awesome.
But
bothering the hell out of me, so that's great.
But the people who matter, the people who really matter in your life need to hear that. They know it, so the good ones do figure that out. But I would not be who I am without my dad, and I know where I was headspace wise 6 years ago. I know where I am now. There isn't a day that I don't think of stuff that I'd like to call him and talk to him about. And when that opportunity is gone to just be able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody, I realize this is very deep and very heavy, and I'm sorry for that, but I've had this knocking around in my head all day. Thank you, Facebook, for reminding me of these memories that perhaps I didn't want to remember, but screw you, like Mark Zuckerberg. But more than anything else, right? The tavern is a family. But we always talk about that. The tavern is a family. It's an extended family. The tavern has come together for good people for good reasons. The tavern has absolutely hectored and tormented the people who come into our collective consciousness and try to rook us out of things. Pencil dice. But for the most part, we are a family. And I would just say to you to make sure that you tell all the people who are important to you how important they are. And cheers.
I just want to jump in and say, like, that's super moving, Jim. My dad just passed in April this year, and so I absolutely agree with you.
And I say this, Dirk, I say this with a lot of affection, right? I am sorry, and I welcome you to this terrible fraternity. And I know it So the analogy that I always worked with was that I found helpful was that grief is like a ball in a box, and there is a button that every time the ball touches the button, you hurt. And at first, the ball almost fills the entire box. So every day you feel grief and you feel the sting of grief. And over time, the ball gets smaller. And so over time, the time between those twinges of those twinges get fewer and farther between, but they never lose their potency. It's still going to be that pain. I was years before I could finally change the name of the landline from dad to my stepmom. And you're going to look at his chair and you're going to want to say something to him. You're going to, you're going to think of all this stuff. And I guess what I would say is, we are always testimony to our parents, right? For good and for bad. If I am obnoxious and I irritate the shit of you, blame my mom. But my dad was the guy who introduced me to Princess of Mars and Edgar Rice Burroughs and talked about his love of them. My dad is the person who talked about Robbie the Robot. My dad did not understand Dungeons and Dragons, but he still bought me a bunch of modules when he was home on leave from wherever he was on. He was overseas a lot of his military career. But my dad was also the guy who made sure that I got a telegram on my birthday, no matter where he was in the world. And no matter what, I always got presents from wherever he was, Kuala Lumpur, Germany, you name it. And the stuff that unfortunately is so, when we lose a parent, we have those end memories, right? The last 3 months of my dad's life were horrible. I don't know what the end of life for your father was like, but I always tell people, like, that's the stuff you try to forget. That's the stuff that you don't think about. Think about when, my dad took me to go see Pinocchio in the movie theater when I was like 5. And my dad, I really recognized I was my father's son one time in 1983, 84. We went to a McDonald's one night when he was passing through my hometown, and we sat there for 2.5 hours talking about all the things that we liked, because I am my father's son, and that's how our parents live on, right? Like when we talk about this with our kids, when we talk about this with our friends, that's how they never die. And
Can
Go
I
ahead.
can I give us a happy thing to end with?
Please God, yes, I'm too somber.
So Eric, guess what I heard this week?
What?
I get a call from my grandson Jake, and Eric knows our relationship with Jake. He's my pal, my best friend, whatever.
Oh, I can see where it's going.
He and his wife are going to be parents.
You're going to be a great grandparent.
In a year, I'm going to be a great grandfather. Not just a grandfather, a great grandfather.
Excellent. Well
Little
played.
Jake, little Jake, Eric, little tiny Jake.
Yeah.
He's not so little anymore. He's 20, almost 21. Or he's 20, 20.
Yeah.
Be 21 next year. And so yes, I'm going to be a great grandfather. Not just a grandfather, a great grandfather. And I don't think I'm ready. I'm not ready.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Too young. I'm way too young.
No, you're not. You're old. You're old enough to appreciate it, but not so old that you can't keep up and have fun with it.
Yeah.
Oh man,
that's great.
So anyway,
that's wonderful.
Yeah, I was happy. Yet I did the thing that parents do, like, you guys are 20 years old. Are you sure? You know what? My parents were 19 and 21. They didn't know what they were doing either. So
Great Grandpa Mike. It has a good ring to it.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Or Grampy Mike. That might be good too.
No.
Great Grandpa, come on.
No. I'll stay Papa. I'm Papa. Then I'll stay Papa.
That's
I'm
excellent.
not doing any great grandpa bullshit. So.
All right, Dirk. What's the last thing you want to tell everybody besides go back my damn Kickstarter?
Let's do Kickstarter. Loving.
I mean, I think, like, going back to what you all said, like, you've got a limited amount of time, and you have to be selective and discerning in what it is that you're going to support with, not just your money but with your time. So for me, I say go out and support small publishers and interesting creators and people who are making stuff that they're passionate about, as opposed to maybe giant corporations who are somewhat soulless and detached from the products that they're putting out there, and don't need crowdfunding projects to move their products forward. So that's, and of course, support my product as well.
There you go.
And proper use of soulless in a description. Well played, Dirk. Well played. Nicely done.
Yeah, congrats, man. This is gonna. I gotta get to. I gotta back this too. I think this is an amazing project.
It's when you get us to back your project during the episode, that's when you know you've got a hit.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's right.
I backed when it went live because I.
Oh my God! Yes.
Listen,
we can't all be the Tenkar.
I hope not. I think
I don't have the hair for it, for one thing. Jesus.
Well,
God. My comb over.
Go grayish. Dirk, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for the support. Thanks for the kind words and everything.
No, thank you for making a hell of a great RPG.
Yeah, Faraway Land on Kickstarter. Links in the chat. I would have had a shortened link up, but the website I use apparently got hit with a denial of service attack and has been offline all night. So,
wow.
Yeah, annoying. Thanks to Mike. Thanks to Jim, as always. Thanks to our viewers over on X and on Rumble. We will make sure you always have options besides just the the YouTubes. And other than that, be safe, be well. God bless. Roll those dice, roll them well. Tomorrow night, if you're on the Discord, we'll be doing a hangout at 9 o'clock. And next live streams are Friday and Saturday, 8 p.m. We'll catch you later.
Thanks.
God bless. Be good.